It's 12:05. We can kick off this webinar. Just a little comment on my side. This is a special webinar, not only for the increasing amount of participants, but also because we have seen that many of in our audience will be parents interested in this topic. For this reason, we ask our expert to be open to questions, and we invite you to ask your questions. Rather than having scientific presentations, they will be there. We may end up with a lot of unanswered questions. This is just our first webinar on this topic. We will have more opportunity. I keep shouting now. No, I shout myself. It's different now. And I give the floor to Alexis, our director. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marika. Hello, everybody. It's really a shared pleasure with Marika, with Alessandra, Gregor, Marco, all colleagues from EMCDDA and outside to welcome you. Indeed, 27 webinars. When we started 3 years ago, we were just trying to make possible to have one because during COVID, all those things were new for us. And we were not necessarily very well equipped or familiar with this. So this 27 webinar is a very interesting and important one for us. First, I would like to come back to what Marika said. It's the first time we have so many parents, which means also that's the first time that we have EU or citizens, just not only from the EU. We have parents, we have citizens, we have people from the general public who so far did not necessarily know that there was a European Drugs Agency and what it could provide to them. So I think that's remarkable that we have more than 1,000 people who registered for this seminar. The second comment is, I also noticed that we, at the same time, we have very loyal customers and followers who are there at any webinar or almost. I've seen many of the names, so I will avoid to pick up one and make pissed off all the others. So happy to see you again. We have some new participants, including some members of our management board, some colleagues and friends. So that's also very important because we are just at a tipping point in the development of our agency, and soon we are going to have officially a new mandate, a new mission, including a new name, and together with that come new responsibilities, and to be even more useful for practitioners and for citizens, and ultimately also to be more helpful for people who are using drugs. It's our top priority. It will be even more important. But luckily, we will have also some additional resources to try to provide more and better. Now, if I come to the topic itself, well, first I want to welcome our speakers, and it's Ina, who's prevention researcher from the University of Amsterdam. It's Therese Glatz, who's a parenting researcher from the Örebro University in Sweden, and someone I don't think we need really to present him, but still I'm very pleased to do so, is Gregor Burkhardt, who's a senior prevention analyst at the EMCDDA. So welcome to the three of you. And just to highlight what is for me one of the key or probably the major feature of the EMCDDA webinars, because there are different formulas for webinars. And as far as we are concerned, we really want to seize the opportunity to give more visibility to some of the best experts available in Europe. So what I'm extremely proud as director is that usually Gregor today is an exception, still a nice exception, but usually the EMCDDA webinars, it's not where it's only EMCDDA speaking. On the contrary, we want to give more visibility to experts, to partners. It's part of our co-production approach of the work. And that's really what I think what makes our webinars different. You are not there just to listen to the pure scientific knowledge from EMCDDA or whatever it can mean, but we have a unique role to play to bring people together. And we are so lucky to have parents that I will keep short my introduction, but with two highlights maybe to share with them. It's two key words for the presentation, for the webinar today for me. The first is the title. We speak about substance use. And for those of you who are a bit similar with the way we present the drug situation and the challenges today in Europe, in the European Union, which is everywhere, everything, everyone, one of the key messages together with that is the distinction between licit or illicit substances, or hard drugs, soft drugs, or of original, of vegetal origin or chemical, is not anymore relevant to describe the complexity, the diversity, and the variety of substances that can be used, but also the variety and the complexity of the addictive behaviors. So to not just speak about drugs or subgroups of drugs, but substances, especially for the topic today, which is teens and substance use and the role of parents, is very, very important. And then the second point, which came to my mind last week, we had the meeting of the European National Drug Coordinators in Malmö under the Swedish presidency of the European Union. And one thing that came back to my mind also from previous practice is that parenting and parenting skills, it's something that we should be aware it's not genuine. And there are no good parents and bad parents. There are parents that have a background or through which they inherited some parenting skills. And those parenting skills can be useful to address some situations, but not always. So first of all, there is no shame on the contrary, to recognize that we need to update or upgrade our parenting skills. And also, in particular, when we speak about prevention interventions, for instance, with vulnerable groups or social economically vulnerable groups, from my experience with projects in mental health in Latin America, we can also help people to teach them how to acquire the parenting skills that maybe they've not received in their own childhood. And I think that's key. There are no bad parents. I think we need to recognize that each parent is doing her best or their best. It's not always successful, but that's life. And I'm sure that from the exchanges we are going to have today with the three speakers, there will be, and I wish you to have more ideas, more questions. And please, if you want, don't hesitate to address some of those questions. With 1,000 participants, we certainly will not be able to answer to all questions today, but the webinar is only part of a series of services to our customers. So certainly we will have different ways to come back to you on this soon. So Gregor, but also Therese and Nina, Marika and colleagues, once more, thank you very much. I will listen carefully and I will see you at the end. I'll stay with you and I will come back to the panel for the final comments. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Alexis, for the inspiration of this series of webinars and also for your dedication. Sometimes you have been connecting by traveling in missions, and this is really appreciated by our audience. I'm also listening with two hats because I'm also a parent of a wonderful adolescent. So I'm very, very interesting. And I will give the floor to Rachele Donini, the chair for today. Rachele is an expert in prevention. She has been leading many European projects, very important, especially on training of professionals. And she's collaborating with the EMCDDA, and today she will be the chairperson. Rachele, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marika. Thank you, Alexis. And from my side too, a big welcome to everybody. It's so amazing really to see so many people from every part of the world. So thank you for attending, and we really hope this webinar will give you some opportunity to reflect on your role as a parent or as an adult. Maybe there are also teachers here, sport coaches that deal and that cope with adolescents that might be experimenting with psychoactive substances. So the idea here in this webinar is to explore evidence-based practices to help addressing these concerns and worries with teens from an adult's perspective. So as Marika and Alexis have already said, this webinar is slightly different from previous EMCDDA webinars for a few reasons. So first of all, the audience. As already said, it's open not only to experts, scholars, and professionals, but also and especially to parents, teachers, citizens that are interested in this topic. And also the format is a little bit different because it is organized more as a conversation instead of lectures. So you will see our panelists that will interact the one with each other in a conversation to better address the audience. This is the idea. And also the topics are a little bit different because we are addressing some very pragmatic and hopefully helpful contents for all the adults to help them cope with adolescents and their experimental or problematic use of substances. A few instructions for you that you are participating into this webinar. So if you would like to submit questions to the panelists, please do so in the question and answer session. And please do it while we unfold the different topics. We will have 3 main topics in this webinar. Do we matter? So the role of parents compared with peers. What can we do and say as adults, as parents? So parental rules and communication with adolescents. And does it matter if I use substances? So parents' own use of substance and rules about this. So after each topic and during the presentation, you are invited to submit your questions in the Q&A session. So please stick to the theme of that topic. And so then we can proceed to the next topic and address the questions of that topic. And what else to say? I think we can start. I will now introduce our 3 experts, and we are in conversation with Gregor. Gregor, as Alexis has said, has been working at EMCDDA for over 25 years. He's the senior scientific analyst in the prevention field in the public health unit. His interest is on developing and evaluating prevention interventions and disseminating the European prevention curriculum, where he's one of the more active trainers. Gregor is a reference point for all prevention professionals across Europe. Thank you, Gregor. And then we have Therese Glatz. She's an associate professor of psychology at the Örebro University in Sweden. Her research focus is on parenting, parent-child relationships, and children and adolescents' development. She has a focus on how parents think and perceive their own parenting role, what can influence their sense of competence as parents, and how this makes them relate and behave towards their children. Thank you, Therese. And then we have Ina Koenig is an associate professor at the Clinical Child and Family Studies Faculty of Behavioral Sciences at the University in Netherlands. Ina has made a significant contribution to research associated with parenting and the prevention of adolescent substance use. She has an extensive experience in leading randomized controlled trials and conducted the first trial to evaluate a combined parent and student intervention in the Netherlands. Currently, she's setting up a community-based alcohol prevention together with relevant stakeholders. Ina likes to translate her work into practice. This is why she's been invited here. And she has a history of disseminating her work, utilizing the knowledge gained in the most comprehensive way possible. Okay, then, so I'm very happy to leave the floor to our panelists. Sometimes I might intervene to rephrase what you are saying, but as said, I'm sure you will speak in a way that our audience will understand what is theory-based, but in a way that is understandable. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for all the kind words and also the invitation to share our knowledge about what parents can do. Welcome to all of you. My name is Ina Koning. I will start off with this webinar. Per topic, we will share some slides with information which will hopefully trigger all of you to ask questions. So please do so in the meantime. There are just a few slides so that we have plenty of time for discussion and to really talk about, okay, what are the implications of these findings? So let's start. First, the webinar is about substance use and what parents can do. I should start off with saying that alcohol use is considered to be the gateway to the use of other drugs. So that means that most adolescents start with using alcohol, whereafter the other substances may be used. But this is the very first substance that they may come across. And also, therefore, the very first substance for parents to deal with. So how do you deal with this as a parent? So that's why many of these slides will give examples about alcohol, but we will also go into the relevance of this knowledge for the use of other substances. Okay, let me see. As I said, the onset of drinking is a gateway to the use of other drugs. Also, we know that early drinking and early use of other substances is a higher risk for dependence, for alcohol dependence, also dependence on the other drugs, and addiction to other substances. But we also have knowledge about the impact of early use on lower school performance, for example, and also higher school dropout. So this is why it is highly relevant as a parent also to prevent the early onset of substances among children. What have we seen in recent years? So let's take a look at alcohol use. And I have the example of the trend, the development of the number of children, adolescents, that have used alcohol once in their lifetime. That's the lifetime prevalence. And those who have been drinking in the previous month. What we see here is from 2003 to 2021. So for every year we have looked at how many kids are drinking. And up to 5 years ago, the prevalence of drinking alcohol among youth was declining. Yet since then it stabilized. And in fact, the latest numbers show even a small increase. And there may be many reasons for this. What we think that may play a role here is the COVID-19 situation, the pandemic. But we also see that parents have become more tolerant in recent years again. That may have contributed to this, but we have to see what the future brings us. But the declining trend has stopped. That's one thing that we see for sure. Why are you here? As was mentioned, many parents have signed up for this webinar. Prevention among youth is really difficult because they haven't developed any addiction or health problem yet. So they don't see any problem with drinking or using any other substances. Long-term effects on health is not really considered to be important. And motivating youth to not involve in behavior that is fun, exciting, and tasty, that is a challenge. So that's why parents play a very important role in this. And we as parents have to supervise our children. We have to guide them towards making healthy decisions. So we also should be aware of the fact that human behavior is rather complex. We find ourselves in different situations, different contexts. We have different experiences, and this is also true for parents themselves. So we should take that into account when looking at the role of parents. So they're not the only one influencing their child's behavior. And this is also true for substance use. So today we will be focusing on the role of parents, but it's far more complex than what we will be sharing with you today. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we do know a lot about substance use and parents. These are the three different topics that we will talk about today. The first one, do we matter? It is about the question that many parents have once their child enters adolescence. The child gains more autonomy, wants to be more independent, spends more time with peers, and many parents wonder if they still influence their child, if they have a role, if they have a say in a child's behavior. And this makes sense. Many parents feel that they do no longer play an important role. Let's start with this topic. Well, first of all, the conclusion is you remain important. So don't underestimate that. This is very clear. Parents remain important throughout adolescence with regards to substance use. We know that your influence may change by age, and that has to do, of course, with the increase in autonomy and independence of parents and the increasing role or influence of peers. So we know that, but you remain important. We also know that research shows that you are even more important, more influential than school. Also, the influence of the network of peers is relevant. The network of peers is relevant, but you have an influence on how this network is being created. So with whom is your child socializing with? As a parent, you have influence on that. It is important for parents to keep confidence in your pivotal role, because we see that parents who do not feel confident about their own influence, these parents indeed, these kids indeed tend to use substances at a later time point because of that, because parents change their behaviors. We will get back to this later as well. And this self-fulfilling prophecy that studies show that parents for marijuana use, that parents who thought that their child was using marijuana, but in fact it was not the case. These kids indeed were using more marijuana 1 year later. So be aware of that and believe in yourself. Let's see, let's discuss some studies that we've conducted. The first message is don't worry. We have looked at the role of parental worries. So if parents worry about their child's behavior overall. So it's not just about substance use, but it's also if they get in contact with police or if they will drop out from school. We see that if parents worry too much, that these parents tend to be involved in more ineffective parenting behaviors. So that means that if you as a parent worry a lot, you are more likely to set less strict rules. So you become more tolerant about alcohol. And you, more importantly also, and you see that this effect is stronger, you have conversations with your child about alcohol, but this is not in a very qualitative way done. So if you worry a lot, you tend to communicate in a less qualitative way with your child. And both of these factors contribute to more alcohol use later on. Okay, so let's have a discussion about these first findings about the role of parents and do you matter? And Therese and Gregor, jump in if you want to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ina. I think this was a really good introduction to what we want to talk about. And I want to connect back to also what you said in the beginning, Alexis, which I think is very important, talking about, we should probably talk about good strategies versus bad or not so good strategies rather than good or bad parents. And I think this comes back to the whole idea of the importance of keeping confidence in your role as a parent. And even if you use strategies or you try things that did not turn out the way you wanted, it did not have the effects that you wanted, that we should think about that as maybe a less good strategy rather than being a bad parent. And I think that's really something that we need to keep in mind as parents, as practitioners who meet parents. Yeah, so I want to emphasize that. I think that's a really key thing to talk about. You do matter, and try to remember that.
Yeah, and yeah, Gregor, go ahead.
I think that's particularly important because I think that since the 90s, from several sources, parents have been told when they are adolescents, when they are teenagers, you don't count anymore. Only the peer group counts. But all the evidence from the last 20 years just says the contrary. Parents continue to be important, and the main key pillar of decision making for young people. That's very important because they have really got wrong information for many, many years with that myth of the peer influence. And the slide you just showed the contrary. And that's what I liked also about this study by Bill Grano, which you mentioned shortly, the positive narrative. They observed over time two groups of parents, ones where the parents believed that their kids were not using cannabis, and others who believed that their kids were using cannabis already. And the parents who believed that their kids were not using had better effects in the sense that their kids tended to initiate less into cannabis use. And if they were using, they reduced their use. So that's what this is, this Pygmalion effect. You remember this mythological sculptor from Greece mythology who fell in love with his own sculpture. This Pygmalion effect, that if you believe strongly that your kids are not doing substances, this will have a strong effect on them, because they will know what you expect from them, what you believe, that you believe in them, that they won't use. And even if they do use, then they try to adjust to this behavior. That find a very beautiful effect. It sheds also a nice light on why it is not good to buy these drug testing kits that some enterprises want to sell you, so you can make urine tests with your own teenagers to find out if they actually are doing, because this beautiful effect of the Pygmalion, you destroy if you do urine testing. I mean, nobody in Europe would do this, I presume, but in other continents, this is widely sold by some enterprises. So trusting in them is okay. It does not mean that you have to completely close your eyes for any evident signs of substance use problems in your kids, but a departure point of, I believe you will not engage in substance use, is a very healthy one, compared to the negative framing of you will anyway do it.
So thank you very much, because you have given some very interesting perspectives, also from a parent's point of view. You said parents do matter, so this is really important. Then you said, don't worry, and then you're also saying that if you believe and you monitor, this has an impact on substance use of your adolescent. So I think this is something that really all parents can do, to be aware and confident in their role, and to believe what they are doing. So thank you very much. This is a very encouraging message that comes from you. We have some questions here. One from Riccardo from Italy, asking, very interested in prevention. The positive discipline method seems very good to me. Does anyone have experience or knowledge about it?
The positive discipline, I'm not sure what is meant with this, but I assume it's about, as a parent, setting rules or restrictions in combination with a good communication about this and staying in touch with your child. We know, and I will get back to this in the second part as well, and we know that this is an effective way to deal with the substance use of your child. So I will get back to this later with some findings, with some results, and I don't know if Therese or Gregor wants to add something.
Well, I just want to add, I mean, I think it's easy enough to say that, I mean, be confident, because that's a hard thing to be if you doubt your abilities. So I think one thing also that's important is to try different things as a parent based on what evidence show, because it's really trying out different things that will inform you as a parent what is effective, and then that would be strengthening. So I think really dare to try out different things and not stick with one thing that seems not to be working, but try different things, basically. And the second thing that I think is important, connected to the self-fulfilling prophecy, is maybe it's not just what you say or do, it's actually what you're not doing or saying. So you might send a message to your adolescent about what you expect and what you not expect, that might have a larger impact on your adolescent than you might think. So really think about what messages you're sending to your adolescent about these things, because that will have an impact.
Oh, thank you very much. And there is another question on the same topic. what would be the most neutral way for a parent to have a conversation with his children about substances? So the key points to address this topic with an adolescent.
Yeah, well, first of all, it really depends on the kind of the using phase your child is in. So if your child is not using, you will have a different conversation than when your child is using the different substances or one of the substances. So that's important to keep in mind. It really, what makes it so complex is that every parent and every child is different. So what works for one child may not work for another one. So you have to find a way as a parent to stay in touch with your child, to know where your child is, to kind of create a family context wherein your child is willing to share information with you instead of having secrets. And you as a parent, you are involved in what your child is doing and how your child is doing that, with whom, where, and when. So these are important aspects to consider, and that together makes it possible and enables you to have a qualitative conversation. And overall, if you look at communication science in general, it's good to ask questions. And it's good to be open as a parent to what your child wants to share with you, instead of having some judgments yourself already. And it doesn't say that you do not share your ideas about using or not using, or the extent to which the child is allowed to use. So it's good to share that as well, but in a respectful way.
Thank you, Ina. There's an interesting question asking how parents could remain good, especially in preventing. I think this is an issue for many parents. They are afraid sometimes to be too tough, to be perceived not good. So the question is how to remain good, especially in preventing.
Yeah, well, for alcohol use, and that's usually the first substance that you will come across as a parent and as an adolescent. We know very clearly across the world that it is important to postpone the onset of drinking and postpone it until the legal drinking age, which is different in the different countries. But that's important as a parent to stick to the legal drinking age, and to explain that to your child. Do not drink because there is a reason for this legal drinking age. It has to do with the health effects. And so I think that is one thing that you could do. And one thing that we know of is a very effective strategy for parents. And how you do that exactly, that's up to you as a parent, because some parents may explicitly say this multiple times. Other parents just kind of wrap it up in any conversation or in a situation that has happened in the nearby context. So that really differs. But that's one thing that we know of. And I will get back to this in the second part.
Thank you, Ina. Therese, Gregor, do you have anything?
I think there is. Therese, do you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
Noise.
You
I
go
think
ahead.
it has quite some cultural things. I mean, think about Germany, where the drinking age is 16. So it's difficult to explain what you do if you go to the next border of other countries. And I think there's a big cultural thing that in some cultures, in my personal view, countries that had a dictatorship past, like Germany, Spain, and so on, parents have a particular hard relation with setting rules. That feel particularly guilty if they set rules and demand certain minimal behavioral rules again. because from their cultural background, this is not well seen in their country. They need to be relaxed and modern and so on. And I understand that many people who, even in the Netherlands, Ina, you told me that once, that the biggest obstacle for parents is to overcome that feeling. I'm fascist, I'm over controlling, I am too rigid and so on, because that's what you get thrown on your head from your kids if you establish certain new rules, particularly in a country where the legal drinking age is still low.
Therese?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's very, very complex. It's individual differences on what Ina said, what works for one adolescent might not work for the other. And it's cultural, like what works in this culture, this country that we live in. But I think a general thing, and we have kind of got into it a bit here and there, is the relationship, the quality of the relationship and the quality of the interactions that you have with your adolescent. Because I think it's good to ask questions, as we have mentioned, and show interest, but it should be done in a very respectful way, so that the adolescent or the child see these questions as a way for parents to be interested rather than to snook and get just information. So I think that building a strong relationship where adolescents realize that what you are doing, what you're asking, is because I'm really interested in you as a person. So that's where, I think you should start as a parent. And then rules might work very well with some adolescents and might be not effective for other adolescents. And there you have to feel, what kind of rules do I as a parent need to have? I need to have some rules, but where do I set the line? What is important in our family, so that it's not too many rules. So a balance, which is easier said than done, but that's the complex picture of it.
Thank you, Therese. About this, there's another question asking which factors can impact the influence between parents and their teenagers apart from age. So which factors have an impact in the influence? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of factors that could impact this. We do see that. So if we just think about parents' own beliefs, we see a decrease over time as a function of age. So it's normative that parents feel less confident over time because you do have much less influence in all of these different parts of the adolescent or the child's life. So, and I think that the influence in itself also decrease over time, and that's normative. But on an individual level, I think there's a lot of different factors. So you have peers, what kind of peers do this child hang out with? And you as a parent might have an impact or could talk about peers or peer influence with your children, even if you might not have a direct influence on the peers. There's culture, there's, a lot of circumstances that could make parents be less influential. So there's a lot of factors except for age, I would say.
Thank you, Therese. Gregorina, would you like to add something to this, or?
Yeah, I of course I agree with what Therese just said, and we also should consider individual factors. So some kids are just looking for more sensation than others, and experimenting with substances could be one of the behaviors that they want to engage in, and so that differs, and that makes it more difficult for parents, of course, to deal with. I think that as a parent, you only know what you should be doing once it's happening. So, and it is relevant for parents to know that they have a role and that it's easier for parents to prevent the use than to deal with it and reduce the use once they are using. So I think that we should focus much more on prevention. So what is needed and what is relevant for kids to perhaps experiment with the use of different substances, but stick to that and not to be involved in heavier use and risky use. And the complexity here is also, we know that alcohol is an important gateway drugs, but we also know that alcohol is in most countries culturally accepted, and it's not considered to be a drug by many parents. So what parents in the Netherlands were told for many years that they should teach their child to drink responsibly. That's been said by the different healthcare organizations in the Netherlands. And then we found out that that's actually not a good thing to do, because these kids were the ones who increased their drinking much quicker, and they also started to use other substances. So then we changed the message that we wanted to share with parents. And it's still a difficult one, because it is, because of the acceptance of this, it is difficult also for parents, and I will get back to that later as well. Perhaps some parents need to change their own behaviors as well, because they're important role models.
Thank you, Ina. So Gregor, you want to say something about this?
I guess we're coming back to what you say in the next session, isn't it? So we're anticipating a little bit. I just wanted to make a little caveat, because for temperament, as Ina and Teresa said, is very important. And the temperament of your kids limits a lot your possibilities. And I sympathize very much with the parents who might have children with attention deficit disorder or sensation seeking, because you get always through walls on a wall of shame of all other parents who are saying, can't you do proper parenting? What are you doing at your education at home? This kid is totally uncontrollable, and so on. So there are things where you should be aware there are limits to what you could do, neurobiological limits, where you can try as much as you want in establishing rules, being warm, and so on, and there will not be so great outcomes. So what we are just saying is that you are influential and can do a lot. It's not meant to kind of stigmatize or giving some shame on parents who obviously have children that are very difficult to handle for reasons that are not related to their own behavior or to their own possibilities.
Thank you, Gregor. Thank you, Ina and Therese. So to wrap up this topic, I think the key message is you matter. You matter as a parent. Don't worry too much, because this doesn't help. And what you believe is important. There are still a lot of questions, but I'm sure most of them can be addressed while we proceed. Okay, so we can go on to the next.
Thank you. Yes. So much of this has been said actually already. So if you as a parent provide alcohol, it increases the likelihood of more heavy drinking, and also the earlier transition to using other substances. And that's why we know that as a parent, it is important to delay the onset of drinking as long as possible. Because when doing so, you also delay the potential onset of using other substances. And with every year delay has also a protective impact on the development of the child. So set rules about not drinking and using drugs. Is very clear evidence about that. And in the Q&A, it was also said, shouldn't there be a difference between setting rules and making agreements? Yeah, I completely agree with that. So Setting rules indeed is something that you do more often when your child is younger. And once your child becomes older, and this is exactly what I also meant with that your influence is changing over time, is then you have you communicate about these rules and you agree upon some rules. What is important as well, and that hasn't been mentioned yet, as far as I know, is that as a parent, it is far more difficult to set these rules and stick to these rules or agreements if you're the only parent of the whole peer group that has these rules. That makes life for your child difficult. Your child wants to belong to a peer group, wants to be liked, and wants to be a part of all the activities that they're doing. And drinking or using substances could be one of that. So what we know that is helpful is that parents talk with other parents, they communicate with them, and they find agreements on a shared set of rules, so that more parents of peers in the same group have the same rules. This not only strengthens you as a parent, you have more confidence in yourself, it also is more clear for your child, and it makes it more easy for your child to adhere to these rules that you are setting. So this has been studied, the effect of this in Sweden with effects, and in the Netherlands, the PAS, Prevention of Alcohol Use study. And we know that this is an effective way to do, so that parents don't feel alone and they don't feel the only strict parent, because that's what you often heard. I don't want to be the only strict one. Okay, let's continue to rules and communication. We have looked at the different combinations that parents can engage in with respect to rules and the quality of communication about alcohol and the frequency. And I'll just quickly show them to you. Overall, you see that the rules decline by age. So this is a study that included 12 to 15-year-olds. And in the left column, you see that for both the red and the green line, you see a small decline in the strictness. This makes sense. It has to do with the natural development, normative development of adolescents. You see some differences in the quality of communication, but that's relatively stable, as well as the frequency of communication is also relatively stable. So there is this authoritarian group of parents that is fairly strict at age 12, becomes more tolerant and has overage, and has a fairly low quality of communication and a low frequency of communication. Then we have the decliners, parents who decline very rapidly in their level of strictness from age 12 to 15. Their quality of communication about alcohol is on average, and the frequency of communication as well, on the little bit on the lower side. Then we have the permissive parents. These are the ones who are tolerant right from the beginning, from age 12. It's a very small group of parents. The quality is, well, a little lower than average, and the frequency is fairly low. So this is what we see in the different types of combination of rule setting and communication. But what about their drinking behavior of the child? What is most effective? What is the most effective combination? We see here that it is clear that the permissive ones, the kids with the permissive parents are the ones that already drank more alcohol at age 12 and increase rapidly over time. The same is true for the decliners. They start with the same level of strictness at the beginning, but they increase more rapidly than the other groups. And what we see here overall is that a higher quality of communication and a higher level and a lower decrease in strictness of rule setting over time, that's the most effective one if you want to lower the alcohol use among your child. So we also looked at what should parents do? Some parents just don't feel confident enough, and they feel that it may not work. It doesn't work if I set these rules. It's difficult, and I don't know how my child will respond. So we looked at, okay, what we told parents to set these rules in an intervention study, make agreements with other parents. That's also what we did. And these kids also followed some lessons in class and gained some knowledge and increased self-control by this school-based program. When looking at the parents, we looked at, do parents first need to have this confidence? So that's the self-efficacy. Or do they just need to change their behavior first and set these rules? And then that will increase their confidence. Or is it the other way around? And what we found here is that as a parent, you can first set these rules. And that in turn will increase your own confidence. And not the other way around. So don't wait until you feel you have enough confidence, but just start doing it, start acting already. Okay, you can do something, that's for sure. Communicate these rules in a qualitative way. That's also what the combination of these two, of the rules and communication, indicated. It is important to make these agreements, and especially once your child becomes older. We know that you need to change these rules based on age or based on the fact that your child has started using any substance. So then you have to communicate again what these rules can be, and also be clear about your own position in that. We know that it is not effective as a parent to communicate too frequently. We know that that may have that may be counter-effective. So do it in a qualitative way, but not too frequent. And what is especially important, and particularly once your child is already using the substance, stay involved in your child's life. His or her whereabouts, the peers that he or she is socializing with. So stay connected, stay in touch with your child. That's really important. Okay, if you're setting these rules, how may that impact your child's alcohol use? So we know that self-control, so the ability of children to refrain from using a substance, is a very important factor in using substances. We looked here if the rules that you're setting as a parent, to what extent does that influence the level of self-control, and to what extent is that in turn influencing the drinking behavior. And we were interested in these rules in combination with the quality of communication. Does it matter if you communicate these rules in a qualitative way? Well, what we see is the dotted line indicates significant relations. So we see that also if you have a low quality of communication, the rules that you're setting does increase the level of self-control 1 year later. But the self-control does not have an impact on alcohol use. For the bold line, you see that there is a significant indirect effect of rules through self-control on alcohol use. So for those parents who communicate these rules in a qualitative way, these rules contribute to self-control. And that self-control enables children to refrain from drinking. The question here is, how is this possible? And we believe that this has to do with motivation. So if you, as a parent, communicate in a qualitative way, then your child is not only able to refrain from drinking, he or she is also motivated and willing to adhere to your rules. While if you're posing these rules without communicating about this in a qualitative way, your child may not have the motivation and may not be willing to adhere to these rules. So this shows that this combination between these rules and the quality of communication is really important. Gregor.
That's another slide, which is not mine, but I happily admit that I never had any original idea in my life. That's from our American colleagues, from Belgrano again. The idea is why in the US, which has the most lenient lenient laws about cannabis, the whole message that parents are getting, or what the youngsters are supposed to be getting from their parents, is all about abstinence, while the official policy environment is not really fitting to that. Whereas in Canada, in UK, in Australia, this is much more balanced. So this is not to say that you should focus on harm reduction messages. We're actually saying the contrary, and there will be another talk, probably another webinar of ours, about what to do when your kids are actually using substances, and then you need to have really harm reduction messages. But the point is, it should fit a little bit to the cultural background. We can go ahead now. There's one also. Another thing, which is rather what you can do, is a nice analysis of data that only our Spanish National Focal Point are collecting. When they do their youth surveys within ESPAD, or what's the correspondent data set, here is the relationship of youngsters who have, or young people who have been taking cocaine the last 12 months, had a much better access to pocket money than those who had been consuming cannabis or had been binge drinking alcohol. So there's really kind of a pocket money escalation that's related to their substance use. I think that's important because I guess that several of the parents here listening come from private schools, which is often quite a combination of having quite some disposable income also for the kids, and maybe less, or I do not make a statement about the monitoring, but what's the available, a very simple thing, the available pocket money is a simple, can be a risk factor for your kids. If there is more money available, they have more substances to buy or more access, since the availability is always there. Do you want to go ahead, Ina? So it's not the thing about that most people think it's all about poverty and faulty parenting. No, it's simply a very simple thing, available pocket money.
Yeah.
Okay, so have we finished with this session? Does Teresa want to say something about what we can do?
Well, I think one thing I saw in the comments, and also what I made a note about, which is important to talk about, is what do we mean with qualitative communication? And I think that one thing that is important is really to take the time to talk with the child. So not constantly nag or tell the child these short messages, but really take the time to listen, because we know from research that information that parents get about children's whereabouts are from children's own disclosures, so what they tell us. And if we're not taking the time to listen to children in a qualitative way, really sit down and listen and take time, then we will not get as much information as parents. So take the time, choose your time when you discuss, have a conversation about these things, and really not just talk about different, consequences or situations where the child might need ideas on how to act and how to think. So that, I think that's, I don't know, Ina, if you want to come in and say something more about what we mean with qualitative, a good communication.
Yeah, well, this is very different for many different children. We measure this by asking them questions about, do you feel understood? When talking about alcohol, do your parents respect you? Things like that, and it's very subjective. So I agree with everything that you're saying, Therese. And one new concept that I'm now looking at is the time that adolescents and parents spend together on any other activity. And we see that this, because you may want to communicate in a qualitative way and actually listen and take the time to do that. But if you do not create these moments that you could communicate about anything, and then at some point substance use will come up as well, but it starts already earlier in childhood, that you spend time together and that you enable to have a conversation at all. Mm-hmm. And now we have some very first indication that this is really important as a parent, to spend time with your child. It contributes to a better relationship, but you also enable the opportunity to communicate. So that's important. I also saw a question about, should you work with teens or with parents? I would say with both of them. That's what we know. From a prevention perspective, you should provide kids also with the tools that are relevant in resisting the substance use. It shouldn't be all about substances directly. So you could target also the relevant mechanisms like self-control. That is an important one. But I do think that particularly in the prevention part, parents are really important, and we shouldn't underestimate that.
So thank you, Teresa and Ina. Indeed, this was a question. What is qualitative communication? So thank you for addressing it. And then there's another question. Now it's not in the chat anymore, but I read it, and asking, as a professional and as a parent, what to do when adolescents say, yes, but we know that, for example, ayahuasca or cannabis can be helpful and they're not so bad. What to say when your adolescent responds to you in this way?
Yeah, I think this is what Ina was talking about, that it's really difficult to get your message through because young people might not see the negative consequences yet. So I guess there's a balance of talking about situations that adolescents might actually face, where that is relevant for them, and not talk about like in 20 years you will have this and this problem, but like what are the actual situations here and now that adolescents could associate with or relate to that might awake their ideas that this is not just black and white. It's not, I mean, it's not, yeah, I guess kind of use situations that they could relate to, that I would say. I don't know if you have anything else, Ina and Gregor.
Gregor?
I mean, the same applies to alcohol. I mean, the drugs do have positive effects, obviously. That's their raison d'etre, that's why they exist. So the fact that some people feel pleasure doesn't mean that you should not have rules about them. let's talk about the whole thing about alcohol. I mean, in many cultures, coming back to the story about introducing early into alcohol, let's face it, in many cultures, many people, even academics in my own family, believe that if they introduce their kids with 13 years to alcohol, drinking with them, that this will lead to them drinking more responsibly later on. I mean, let's face it, there's a whole story created by industries or by interest groups around this, that you as parents has to introduce them early, that will save them. That's very frequent. I know Italian qualitative researchers who contend ferociously that in Italy that's not true, that in Italy it has a protective effect. I give them that, I say, because Italy seems to be the only country in this continent where it's totally taboo to be drunk in public. Maybe there it has an effect that they learn from very early times on that you might drink, but you can never be seen drunk. This is something where I don't get into, but I think we have many substances where we want to tell our offspring not to go into it because they're simple, because the benefits do not outweigh the harm in a young adolescent brain. And that's the very simple thing. The ayahuasca argument is, I mean, where do people drink ayahuasca? You have to dive 3 days into the jungle and then go through a ceremony, and they select who goes to the ceremony. It's not for everyone. There's a little bit of the myth that drugs are beneficial just for taking them, forgetting that there's a whole social context around. So I think parents need to know that the whole story about introduce them early into alcohol to make that safer, or talk to them early about alcohol, that this is basically something the industry wants you to do. All websites in the world telling you talk early with your kids about alcohol are financed by the alcohol industry. Drink Aware in Ireland has now stopped their program because it has never proven any effect. But now they say officially, now we are going into encouraging parents to talk early about alcohol. But as we have just seen, talking early about alcohol means just that they learn alcohol is very important for socialization and nothing goes without. So that gives them certain attention bias. I think these two things parents need to know, that if you talk too frequently, as Ina just said, you create a certain attention bias. Then they believe everything is only around that, while the message should be very few people take psychoactive substances. And I like that thing that Ina said, the thing of attitudes come after behavior. Try things first, and this will change the attitude. That's a very nice rule in behavioral sciences. Attitude follows behavior. You don't need to work on people's attitudes, beliefs, and confidence. You can dive straight into action, and this will change the attitude. It also works on societal level. And the rules, there was one detail. I think the rules that parents have common contracts about, we are setting the same rules, is also a benefit for your argumentation with the kids. They can't say, but all my friends can come home at midnight or after midnight. I'm the only fool who has to be back home. No, you can, no. There's a rule between all the parents here. And you can even set the same rule about internet use at night. Agree with all parents in the class from 10 o'clock on, we switch off, or we kick off our offspring from the mesh and from the net. This helps a lot in the negotiations with your children to say, it's not me alone, it's all the other parents think alone, because we have read the studies. And so that's why we are setting these rules. So you cannot be undermined.
Sorry to interrupt, but we need to proceed. So I would like to wrap up very shortly what you have said. So first of all, spend time, listen first to your kids. Find agreement with other parents, what Gregor was just saying, and just do it. Just do what you think you need to do. Don't wait to have everything ready. Just do it. And make agreements with your child and remain involved in your adolescent's life. Okay, thank you very much. Let's proceed to the next topic. Does it matter if I use substances myself?
Yeah, thank you. You can use substances. That's overall what we see. But it is preferably out of sight. So, for example, do not drink or do not smoke when your child is in your presence. And do not use it too much or too often. And let's take a look at an example of alcohol use again. We looked at different parenting drinking profiles. So many parents participated in this study, mothers and fathers. That's what the M and the F stands for. M, the mothers are indicated by the yellow bars, and the father by the red bars. Sorry, I got distracted by this thing flying in already. And so we found that there are 6 different groups of drinkers. Group 1, where both parents are drinking not or just occasionally. A second group of parents that is drinking frequently but light, just 1 or 2 glasses. One group where the mother drinks occasionally, but the father drinks daily. The 4th group where the mother and father drink daily, and the 5th group where the mother drinks occasionally, the father drinks heavy. And the 6th group where mother and father both are heavy weekend drinkers. So they do not drink during the week, but they are heavy drinkers during the weekend. And we looked at the impact on the alcohol use of these children. So this group of parents, group 5, where the father drinks heavy, we find that this group of children are the ones that initiated their drinking at a younger age compared to all other groups. For the 6th group, where the mother and the fathers are heavy weekend drinkers. So not during the week, but only in the weekend, but then they drink a lot. We find that this has an impact on an early onset of drinking, as well as on a more steep increase in the level of drinking when the adolescent becomes older. So this is what we find for drinking. We know that if parents set rules, and once they are drinking, even if they are drinking themselves, it is very effective. So if you're drinking alcohol or if you're smoking or whatever, it is important to set these rules, and you can do that in an effective way. Because these heavy drinking parents, this has a stronger effect on the alcohol use among boys, youth in lower levels of education, and youth with tolerant parents. So setting these rules is, again, protective, even if you drink yourself heavily. And what we see here is that quantity seems to be more important than frequency. So that's also an important takeaway. This was what we wanted to share with respect to parents' own use. I saw a question also in the Q&A that I would like to address immediately, that if you, as a parent, you have been drinking and smoking yourself once you were younger, and your child asks about this, what should you say and do? I think you should be honest. So the whole relationship, parent-child relationship, is based on respect and honesty, and you should trust each other. That's really important. And part of that is being honest about your own experiences when you were younger, and explain them why you did that, and perhaps why you do not do that anymore. Or we know also a lot more nowadays compared to 20 years ago when you as a parent were younger. For example, the example that healthcare institutions were telling parents to teach your child to drink and to learn your child to drink responsibly in a home setting. We back then didn't know that that had a negative impact on the onset of drinking, but also on the rate of drinking later on. So we know a lot more. And that's why you as a parent may have different rules than you had yourself when you were a child.
Thank you, Ina. That was really one of the more significant questions about this theme. Gregor and Therese, would you like to say something about this, because we are running out of time?
No, I don't think I have anything to add at this point.
Perfect. So this gives me an opportunity to ask our director to say something. I'd like just to say to the participants that we got a lot of questions, very interesting questions, and some of them were impossible to be addressed. We will record them, we will discuss and find a way to address them, probably in a questions and answer, we do not know yet, but your questions are not lost. And also we probably will have more webinars on this topic. And now I ask Alexis, thank you very much for having been with us until now. I know that you are traveling for work, so we don't miss an opportunity to listen your conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marika. I want first to thank all the colleagues, all the participants, and Raquel had an incredible challenge today. So Raquel, it's very well done, and thank you very much once more. Well, I will not try to summarize everything that was said. I would say just a few words that seems not really summarizing, but that are very important. I think for me, the first thing is there is no way you can communicate in a more or less appropriate and qualitative way with your children about any substance use if you do it only for the purpose of substance use. So I think for me the key, and I think that's the challenge for all parents actually, is how to build a qualitative, a strong relationship with the children. It's much more easily said than done. There were comments also. I want to support what Gregor said, that what we have been discussing, some of the options. There is no magic. There is no magic solution, and if you don't succeed, it's not because you are an incompetent parent. I think one of the talking not only as the director of EMCDDA, but as a clinical psychologist and as a therapist and family therapist myself, I think that there is too frequently a discourse of disqualification of those bad parents or incompetent parents. I mean, if it was so easy and if there was a perfect way to do it, we would know it, but unfortunately it doesn't exist. And as Gregor said, you may find yourself with children who are just testing the limits and with whom you, at the end, some of the agreements you will need to make will be certainly different from what you would do with children who are not testing the limits. And I think there are many families who have a problem with alcohol among their children or drug use. I think you cannot even think about them like bad or incompetent families. And I think for us as professionals, it's really important to insist and to recognize that everybody is doing their best. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. And so therefore, I think something I've observed in the last 30, 35 years, working on those topics a bit everywhere in Europe, is you have also very big, big and important cultural differences, and countries where, for instance, to go to see a psychologist or a social worker to speak about some problems you have in the family is even today still not impossible, maybe, but very difficult. So this is part of I think having an open relationship means also that, of course, again, there are no standard rules. I think being obsessed about possible substance use with by your children is not really, if you only can speak about that with your children, I don't think it will help the relationship. And if the relationship is not good, you will have less tools and less means to help. But in some cases, the relationship is good, and still there is a substance use. So I understand, as Gregor said, we will keep it for another webinar. But I think that's really important. I really want people to feel that they are recognized sometimes as they are just helpless and they don't know what to do. And two key words, I think. First of all, three key words. avoid generalization. When I was working in the university hospital in Brussels, I mean, sometimes the discourse for early detection of substance use, I mean, it's just a caricature. And there are many adolescents who spontaneously don't speak too much. Also, they sometimes sleep very late every night, and they feel a bit isolated. Just for those three criteria, you cannot just deduce your child as a severe substance abuse problem. So, I mean, we need to be cautious about drawing profiles that do not meet the reality, and that may have as a contribution or as a consequence that some teens would even less trust the adults because they would find them really incompetent. And then the two other keywords that I will not comment more, but I would like to share with you is how important and sometimes difficult is to be honest and to be authentic in our communication with the teens. So that's never-ending story and never-ending challenge. But I want to thank the presentation, the knowledge shared by the three speakers, and the incredible challenge for Raquel to make progress the discussion and to even summarize is you give a positive message, and I think that's important. We have means, and we as parents, we have more things we can do. At the same time, we may need to be ready to understand maybe it was not enough, and then to be able to ask for help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis. I echo your thank you to everybody present, the audience, our speakers, Raquel, and you only saw the external part of Raquel. She was also pestered by our internal messages, trying to highlight questions, giving suggestions. So really, really thank you. I hope after that you won't leave us, Raquel. I will now launch a poll to ask you how much you liked, what we can change. Again, we promise we will have more of these webinars because we collected a lot of questions for certificate of attendances. We will go through all of them. You will find the registration of this webinar in a few days on our website. I think I said everything. I just launched the poll for the speakers. For Alexis, who needs to leave, you can leave already. We have finished. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, and bye-bye.